All right, so it's 7:01 and we will start the December 12th meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee. We'll open with public comment if there is any, approve the minutes from the November meeting. And then hopefully Corinne Yance will be here from CVOEO to talk about some of the work that they've been doing. And then depending on how much time that takes up, and it may actually dovetail nicely into continuing our conversations about HOA and DRB. And then we'll do some liaison updates, other business, and talk about the January agenda. There's Frederica. Welcome. Hello. Can you hear us okay?
I can. I'm sorry I couldn't make it in. I've been working and just got home too late and just wasn't in it.
You're here. There's no apologies. It's a hybrid meeting. And that'll be that. So, Dave, you are our public. Do you have any comment before we get started?
No public comment.
All right, sounds good. All right, then that brings me to the minutes from our November meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
I would motion that, but I wasn't here, so I comment on it.
So moved. I was there.
Thank you, Frederica. I will second that. I think I can. That's an interesting question, though. So if Richard, Wayne, and Eric all abstain.
You still have a majority of the people present voting.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Frederica, did you have any comments or edits to the? Okay. All those in favor of approving the November minutes, say aye. Aye.
Is it red?
Oh, you read? Well.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Any abstentions? Eric? Richard, you want to vote or abstain?
Abstain.
Okie doke. And I'm so, for those of you who weren't here, I'm so sorry. I forgot to click record. It was actually a really great, I think a really great discussion, of course. And I feel like ultimately, I don't know what you thought, Frederica, but ultimately I walked away from that feeling like the committee is actually on track. We're doing the work we should be doing. And we've identified a lot of the things that consultants who get paid the big bucks to do this work have identified. So that was nice. Since Corinne is not yet here, I wonder if folks would be okay with skipping down to liaison updates. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
All right. Eric, what's been going on at the Planning Commission?
Well, as you probably know, we have a draft of the town plan that was first draft was approved by the select board. So the second vote is coming up next week. Please show up, please vote for it. It's a good plan. That has gotten us through that stage. We're getting ready to tackle the character-based zoning piece, because that seems to be something that's ahead of us there. A couple of other things we're looking at is the.
Can I ask a question about that? Do you know what the process for that's going to look like? I know David White is consulting on that a little bit, but are you forming like a subgroup that's looking at that, or is he putting together stuff that you all will then?
He's putting together some stuff, and there is a subgroup that's been formed.
Okay.
Just to look at what the current piece does, but I think all of the planning commission members are going to be reading through that document pretty comprehensively to understand what it says and why it says it.
Okay.
But the intention of it is to identify what makes that plant, that current structure, the current regulation, not as valuable as we want it to do, and then conclude on whether we want to modify it, scrap it, do something altogether new around it. There's some discussion about whether we might want to address all three village centers with something similar to that. The issues with the current character-based zoning are somewhat well known. the complaints have come out that it's too rigid, that it's not allowing for flexibility, it's going to create a cookie cutter type environment, so on and so forth. The reason to keep it in place is because if it's done right, anybody who meets the requirements of the character-based district gets an automatic approval. So it's a way to speed up the development. And extending that to the other three regions makes a lot of sense, the other three town village centers. But we're waiting to hear from the evaluation really goes, if they look through it, we're waiting to hear what David has to say about it. And each of the planning commission members will have a say in whether or not they see the problems with it that others do.
Okay. Do you have an expected any dates that we should be aware of, or do you know when David will have a deliverable or anything like that?
David is still doing the final mock-up on volume 1 of the town plan,
Figuring.
which included all of the select board comments. My suspicion is he's going to want to take a little bit of a break after that.
Fair.
So I would, not speaking for the planning commission as a whole, speaking for myself, I would suspect we're not going to see much work on that until probably the second meeting in January.
Okay.
If something would come about.
So then, when is the second meeting? It's next week. What's the date?
That is the 18th, I believe,
19, I
19,
think,
yeah.
at 6:30.
6:30 in here with the select board to do the final version of the town plan. Town plan will then go to the town for a vote. And that should be done at town meeting day. To approve it.
So as far as people, it seems like you say, if it's done right, it makes development easier. And
And
I've never.
that's separate, that's a character-based zoning.
Definitely.
The town plan is the whole overall piece.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, I sorry. And so, and I know that you've said that multiple times, in the last couple of months. And I hear complaints against it, but I never hear anything specific. Cookie cutter.
It defines, for example, things like how much of your building frontage has to have window space versus bricked in or filled space. It defines the slope of the roof based on size of the building. Defines what you can and cannot have on the ground floor, second floor, third floor of the building. Defines things like where the doors can be, where the parking has to be,
The material used.
materials of
It's-
construction, and basic design of construction as well.
But if it's the materials, I would assume that whoever would say that are trying to make sure that, quality materials are being used, and not somebody's not trying to cut corners or cut safety.
Frederica, you can just jump in anytime. Yeah, there are, there's instances where a current homeowner is, putting an addition on their house and they're not allowed to use the same material that the house uses to match the house because of the form-based code. And there's nothing wrong with that material. It's just not part of, and she's in a historic home. And so she there's lots of little,
I suspect if you have an existing home, you're going to be exempt from that.
I mean, there was a whole thing about it.
It's really designed for your developer, you want to put in 50 units.
Mhm.
If you fit these criteria, these design specs for
Mhm.
size of the house, slope of the house, number of windows that are facing the street, not on the street, blah, 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 and the general fit and finish of the house. The Board of
DRB.
DRB, thank you. The DRB has to approve it because
Okay.
you've done everything that it says. So this is less opportunity for someone to say, oh, you didn't dot your I properly here.
I see. So
But-
it actually does protect the building.
If the builder does everything they're supposed to do, yes,
So if they're diligent, then.
they can speed up.
And if the code is written in a way that is amenable to that.
Yeah.
So I think that, hey, how's it going? Affordable housing. You want to hang out? Sure.
No, please.
If you want a table at town meeting, let me know.
I do, thank you. And I would say that both DEI and AHC do.
right next to each
Yeah, that would make my life easier.
other. That's good.
We need to introduce who she is for the record.
Frederica, I'm sorry. Please feel free to jump in. You don't need to raise your hand.
I was just, you know, I was kind of like, I'm now like a half a conversation behind, I think. You were talking about the next steps for David White, and you know, one thing I didn't hear was, you know, one thing that happened in that public meeting is that at the very end, they said that all of our proposed edits would be incorporated, and actually it was David White who said at the end, you know, after there was a vote on that, who said at the end that that's what was going to happen. This was actually at the select board meeting, that all the edits from our committee that SJ had submitted would be incorporated. I'm just wondering if there's any way to kind of review that and see whether that actually happened.
Yeah, the new, hi, Corinne. Is it Corinne or Corinne?
It's Corinne. Yeah, that's great.
It's Corinne. I have an aunt, Corinne, so it's like, yeah, Frederica, the latest version is on the website. And I downloaded it today, and looked through it to make sure that the HOA, comment was added, and it was, but I haven't gone through it yet with a fine-tooth comb to see all of the other things. It's a good point.
My understanding is he was going to incorporate all of those changes as approved by the select board
Right.
into the document. So if they were not approved, they won't show up.
Yeah, I think at the end, the select board voted to approve all the changes that SJ had submitted.
So character-based zoning, town plan, anything else PC?
Well, the wastewater draft feasibility study is supposed to be done, was supposed to be done last week. I haven't seen it up on the town site or not, so I don't know if it's actually finished. But obviously that's gonna be a priority to go through that and see what we can do with it. We do have applying for some issues around some bylaw modernization grants, some grants to upgrade us as a form-based code, and some other grant applications that are being worked on.
Cool. All right, so if it's okay with everybody, I'll table the rest of the liaison updates until after, since we've got Corinne. Did you have a follow-up for the planning commission?
No, I was ready to give the Conservation Commission update, but we can wait.
Hi, Corinne, how are you?
Good. I do have to apologize. I didn't make it to my destination, so I'm calling from a public place. So if you have any sorry, if you have any a hard time hearing me, please just let me know.
Do you need some extra time to get to your destination? Because we can rearrange the agenda.
It's not gonna happen.
Okay.
I mean, it will happen, but it won't happen in the span of this meeting.
I totally understand and really appreciate really appreciate the effort. I wanted to bring you here to kind of introduce the committee to you, and specifically to the work that you're doing, and the resources that are available, some of the upcoming events that are happening, and then also to pick your brain a little bit on some of the upcoming work that we have. So anything you want to share, we're excited to hear it.
Great. So I'll just start with like the big picture overview. As you all are probably well aware at this point, I'm Corinne, Corinne Yance. I am joining from the airport right now, but technically I'm joining from the Fair Housing Project of the Champlain Valley of Economic Opportunity, otherwise known as CVOEO. And what I've recently taken on as a part of my work is the Striving for Equity project, which is a project where we're working to support housing committees. So we've worked with housing committees in the past. We recently got specific funding to kind of like hone in on that work, and something that we've heard kind of time and time again is that housing committees are looking for resources, looking for opportunities to connect with each other. And we're seeing, even just like at the beginning of this project, lots of housing committees are working on similar, addressing similar needs. And they're all kind of like reinventing the wheel. Everyone's embarking in on this journey for the first time, so to speak. So what we're hoping to do through this project is start kind of like creating resources where they don't exist, collecting them where they do exist, and trying to make it so that not every housing committee kind of has to start from fresh. And so we've been doing that through monthly workshops, which are usually about an hour and a half, and then monthly housing committee drop-in sessions, which is kind of an hour, like social, more informal space for housing committees just to talk about what they're working on. And what I've been doing for those, just to kind of like hook people in, is I've been setting up a topic kind of in advance to kind of like reel people in. So this coming Thursday, we have our technically our third housing committee drop-in. One of them kind of had to get switched around a bit, but this one is going to be focused on ADU programs. So thinking about how housing committees can encourage ADU development. And part of the reason why we chose that topic is because we've heard from a few different housing committees that, interested in talking about how we can kind of make ADUs a more accessible resource in our communities. So I kind of went through a lot fast, and I know there's a couple like specific questions, SJ, that you sent that I'm like prepared to talk about. I'm just gonna take a pause and see if there's any questions, or if you're having a hard time hearing me, or if there's anything I kind of need to repeat.
I'll open it up to committee members.
I have to go with her. She's on the deaf side.
Oh, go ahead.
Her to be upset, but.
Oh, man. You're losing your buddy, Eric.
That's all right. We're balancing out the tape of that.
That's right.
I don't have any questions as of yet, no.
Okay. Frederica or Richard?
I mean, not really any questions. I mean, so far, I think the idea of getting housing committees together is so that they can exchange knowledge and not reinvent the wheel is really good.
Yeah, and I think I've been able to and Corinne, please correct me if I misstate something, but I've been able to attend a couple of them. They alternate between one at noon for folks who are able to kind of make a lunchtime, and then one in the evening for folks who can't make a lunchtime but can make an evening. And it has been a much more kind of informal and useful way to connect than some of the bigger meetings that like CCRPC has put together, where, there's a lot of people in a room and everybody's giving kind of a, not formal, but a status report. And, it's not really conducive to kind of the back and forth or asking questions. And so they've been really useful. And, the hook that Corinne mentioned about, having an overarching topic is nice to kind of frame the discussion to almost like an icebreaker and to focus things. But then afterwards, you end up kind of talking about all sorts of different things. And I think it is a really useful resource, and a nice way to also make connections with neighboring towns that you can then, email somebody and be like, hey, I feel like you were working on this thing and a year ago, and now we're working on it, and, love to pick your brain about it. So those drop-ins have been really helpful. What kind of resources do you currently have compiled, and are you planning to compile?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, like our main resources are probably some of the things that you're familiar with. So, of course, we always point people to the housingdata.org website, and specifically the tools we have on there that are intended to help municipalities and housing committees. It's kind of like a lot of information, and so that's why we've actually set up in the beginning, we were using like a Google Drive where we're collecting some of the resources, and now we have it on a website. So I sent it around like the website link. It's still very early stages. And I know right now some of the things we have on there, of course, the recorded resources are all going to be, or the recorded workshops are all going to be on the website. That way, not only can someone watch the workshop if they can't participate, but it's something that we can all kind of go back to as needed. And then let's see, some of the things that are on the website now. The Vermont Community Rural Development VCRD have a really great leadership kind of booklet that kind of really walks people through like how to mobilize their community around specific policies that they want to see happen. And I thought it was just really legible and easy to read. So, but also lots of information there. So that's one of the ones we point people to. We have like this a really great archive from our Fair Housing Month activities that we do every year that has like a whole host of panel discussions that I think are helpful in informing people's work. So we link that on our resource page. We also have some like, some of the drier but more necessary, or not more necessary, but necessary materials. So there's a resource I know about wastewater and sewage infrastructure for rural towns. I'm blanking on the rest of them, but before I sign off today, I'll put it the link to the resource page in the chat. I know, SJ, do you have a policy where is the chat public and part of the housing committee, or is that something that I should email to you separately?
I don't know how it gets recorded. I don't know if it's part of the Zoom recording that gets posted to the public or not. You can email it to me separately if you're concerned about it, if it's not something that you want public, and if it is, if you don't mind, then have at it.
I'll do both. I just know that some housing committee meetings I've participated in had some really like specific rules around the chat, which was basically they're like, don't put anything in the chat that's like we're not engaging with that at all. So that's why I was.
Oh yeah, no. You can certainly go ahead, and then I'll copy everything at the end.
Yeah, and then maybe actually I might take a minute. If I shared my screen, is that something that would be visible to people?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that. I was also going to ask if you've got the I was going to ask if you've got the bandwidth to share your screen, because I can also share it if that's easier for you.
I believe so. Let me give it a go, and if it fails, I'll pass it to you. Let me just pull up the website. Give me 2 minutes.
Sure. The other thing too that because they're this project has been going on for a little while now, but they're still really gathering a lot of input and feedback. And so if there are resources or research that we would love, that we think other committees could do, and we would love to have somebody else do for us, and have the Striving for Equity project put together some of those resources for us, be thinking about that. Are there things that we'd like for them to be
For after the meeting.
Okay.
Don't read it now.
Okay, be thinking about that, and so that we can make some suggestions for the kinds of things that would be useful for our committee to have and to be able to access.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really encouraging people, of course, acknowledging that this is a new project, that I'm one staff person and I'm working all across the state, but I still have been encouraging people, if there's something that you want to see, it's not already out there, you should reach out, because that's really important to the work we're doing. If it doesn't exist, and it should, and other housing committees could utilize it, it's something that we'd like to help put together. And if it's not in our wheelhouse, we have plenty of partners like within the field that we can tap on. And it looks like I overbelieved in my internet, and so the website won't load. So SJ, I put it in the site, and I do, like, because we're still developing the tool. We don't yet own a domain, so it's a Google site. As you can see, the site's.google.com, and then it's describing for equity project.
Can you see that, Corinne?
Yes, great. And so if you click on the resource link over on our left, that's like, right now it's honestly just a list of links. So it's not the most engaging resource, but it's still a resource, and something that, again, we'll keep updating and we'll make more user friendly. So I'm going to be adding some images and some clear kind of summaries of what each tool does. And then eventually, like, perhaps there will be more categories or just ways to make it a little bit more intuitive. But right now, this is how we have it up on the website. One thing I do want to point out when we're on this resource page, I know one of the things that you had asked about was support for, like, I want to say, public support. How to get public support for housing development, like how, and the More Than Four campaign, that's 4 clicks down, that actually links to a website that was developed by folks in communications and fundraising that work in affordable housing across the state. So, and I was a part of that group, and still am, because that's another resource that's still developing. But when you go to the website, you can see that there's kind of great language that people can use. There's different language kind of like pointed for different audiences. So there's kind of like the affordable housing as as an important part of our economic space, as an important part of for housing for folks working in our downtowns. There's kind of like different pointed targeted audiences. And then there's lots of graphics and even posters that you can download and use in your community. So that's
nice.
There will be, like, that's another, we want the resources out because they're already made, but we are going to be, again, all across the state, making a concerted effort to kind of like launch the campaign in a more flashy way later in this winter.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, housing
Go ahead.
ready
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Oh, we have a question.
Radhika, were you asking a question? No, I guess not. Okay, I have a question. So More Than Four, it doesn't quite say what it is. More Than Four what?
The More Than Four campaign. What is that?
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, so More Than Four campaign, if you click on that, it's going to take you to the More Than Four website. And so we worked with a marketing firm, and basically the phrase is more than four walls. So we're trying to kind of like have these resources available so that people can download, for instance, graphics for social media, templates for posters, and like and these materials are to be used at your discretion, but especially in cases where if you have like a development that you want your community to come on board and support, you can kind of use the language or the graphics in that like public push. Be like, like kind of like add your information that's relevant. And then the other thing that you can do is the take action button will like connect you with our team. And so we can mobilize our people kind of like in your community to help support that development as well. So the hope behind this campaign, which is a campaign, it's kind of an idea, the hope behind the campaign is that it has ready-made materials, like outreach materials that people can use for regional, supporting regional housing policy and regional housing development. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
How did you get to that? Yeah, I'm trying to see how you got to that page because I'm looking for it. And I Googled CVOEO and I just can't get from CVOEO to that one.
Did you put it in the chat, Corinne?
I put it in the chat. And again, because these tools are still developing, there's a lot of like holes in our there's a lot of spaces where we're still like making it a little better. So right now, this website is basically accessible to the people that I've emailed it to, because it's a Google website. And really what was happening was that I was kind of sharing these tools on Google Drive, and I was hearing from people like, the Google Drive is kind of confusing. And so I it was like a quick band-aid, like how do I make it more accessible and more easy to look at and like navigate. So our development person at CVOEO was out last week, so it just isn't linked on the website yet, but I assure you it will be. And then the other thing that we'll be doing is buying the domain. So right now, to get to the website, it's sites.google.com/view/thriving equity project. But soon it's gonna be I don't know if we're gonna land on Striving for Equity Project or CVOEO, or I think we called it like the housing resource. It'll be, we'll probably have to buy a couple domains, but most importantly, it'll be linked directly on the Striving for Equity CVOEO page. So yeah, we're like kind of like racing to keep up with the need, and it just means that things are not developing as linear as they could. The other thing I'll just event calendar, that's going to be all of our events each month. Right now, we're kind of like deep in our quarterly report and holiday season, so we've like planned December and that's it. Come January, we're going to be actually planning several months ahead. So that right now the events calendar has our 2 events for December on it. When you check back in January, it's going to be all of our events for the winter, and spring season. The growing for our growing community, that's not a live link. When it is live, it's going to be a map of all the housing communities across the state, and kind of highlighting who we're directly working with. And that's going to be another tool for our housing committees to cross-pollinate and to connect to other housing committees. So that way you're not like, I'm not a gatekeeper. You can go to the page and just see who's out there and how they're doing the work that they're doing.
That's cool. Just wanted to see what workshops you had up.
Yeah, so we have our 2 recorded workshops since we just started this project in the fall. The housing data workshop, we had Nate from the HFA. SJ, did you go to that workshop?
I wasn't able to make it, no.
I'm curious if you end up watching it later, I'd be curious to hear your take on it. I'm very familiar with the housing data website, so it wasn't like mind blowing for me, but I'd be curious to know if it was helpful for other housing committee members to watch it. So anyone,
Okay.
if you watched it, please let me know if you've learned something or if you found it helpful. And then the next workshop that's right underneath that is our Vermont our tenants' rights and skills workshop that we did with the Upper Valley Tenants Union at Junction Arts Media and White River Junction. So we do work with housing committees. That's our big community that we have the strongest roots with. We're also offering support to community groups that are organized around housing issues. And so when White River Junction or when the Upper Valley Tenants Union reached out to us and asked us to teach us this workshop, we were thrilled to do it. And now it's a permanent recorded workshop that people can watch. And I'll just say that, like I don't hear as much the topic of tenants' rights or tenant stability coming up in housing committees, just because so much of housing committees work is really preoccupied by urgently trying to encourage housing development for our very our big housing deficit, and that's important work. I will say that when we think about our tenants, whether or not they have housing stability, that is a big part of housing equity, because there are groups of people who have historically not been offered the same opportunities of homeownership, and so they're not passing homes down. And so and of course, housing stability is really important for children to have access to their schools. Just to say that even if that's not the focus of your work, we're always delighted when people can help kind of disseminate tools to connect tenants to the tools that they need.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And I think that especially for a community like ours, where I think we don't have a lot of rentals, and I think that some folks are afraid of rentals, but it is a big need, and it is a kind of a big hole that we should be thinking about and focusing on, and especially with the push to have folks be thinking about ADUs, and it's a part of the picture, but thinking about how a housing committee in a town like ours can kind of help push the rental conversation forward and fold into that tenants' rights and fair housing. I think it is part of the work that we're doing, but it's not an obvious path.
Also say that especially from in the Upper Valley region, some of the housing committees down there, there's been some more movement around thinking about ADU programs. And also I've heard a few like, I wouldn't say concerns, but just like there's some interest in maybe creating supports for homeowners that are interested in like having an ADU, but might need some support in transitioning into being a landlord, because that's also can be a really challenging space to navigate on your own. So yeah, and there's just like, because there's lots of different like places people are going and focusing their energy. I know that there were a couple other questions that came up. The one thing I have to say is that I'm still waiting to hear back. I've reached out to a few people on the question of HOAs. And I'd be curious to hear more about what the kind of base of that question is, because I have like two separate takes on it. But I do, when it comes to the new Housing Act, I would defer to the folks at CCPR, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, just because, like, from what I understand, it impacts zoning, but not HOA bylaws. But you know, I've done like a read through, and I know that, for instance, like Taylor at CCP, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, has like done a really deep dive into the Housing Act, and there's different interpretations of different pieces of it. So
I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I feel like I keep getting different interpretations and I can't tell if I'm just not understanding what people are saying to me, or if that is the reality, that it's not clear to everybody.
It's not clear to everyone, and it's not clear to everyone because there's enough like nuance or like vagueness within the language that it can be interpreted differently, and the intent isn't always like clear from the language. And I know that with this coming legislative action, legislative session, there's already talk about like a part 2, so to speak, that would address some of the hiccups that have come with the first Home Act. The other thing, I know that were you able to, or was anyone on this in this committee able to attend the regional planning commission, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission's? I don't know what they called the meeting. I think it was like a month or so ago, where they like did an overview.
Yeah.
It was a little, I know it was recorded, and I had hoped to share it with other housing committees, because here in Chittenden County, we are actually privileged with some of the experts. We just have more capacity in Chittenden County through our planning commissions than some of the other parts of Vermont. And my understanding is that probably how we interpret parts of the Home Act is going to change the way other planning commissions and other housing committees engage with the Home Act. So like in that way, we're leaders in the field, and also our regional planning commission is going to be a really great resource.
Okay.
I will say now, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
when it comes to HOAs, we actually often get fair housing calls around HOAs because there's a perception of like, oh, well, this is like this, like, you know, like we have like bylaws, we're an intentional community. And sometimes there's not a full understanding of fair housing law. So there are certain things that are kind of enshrined in fair housing law, which has our like federal protections through all across the country, and then our state protections, which are instituted specifically by our state. And HOAs have to follow them too, and bylaws can't kind of like subvert them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of those kinds of calls or those kinds of concerns?
Specifically,
Yeah,
ADUs. So there's a state law saying that ADUs should be allowed everywhere. Can an HOA just subvert that?
well, and so that's where I'm specifically waiting back to from Taylor. I want to say, like, I feel of two minds, because the Home Act is really like addressing zoning, and also like with the intention of making ADUs more accessible. So if you could just kind of like go around the Home Act by making HOAs everywhere, it would undermine the purpose of the Home Act. Like in terms of like what the law says, That's why I'm like deferring to Taylor at the PCR RPC. Oh my gosh. what a
Yep, you got
terrible-
it.
That time I did. I'm just waiting to hear back some my sense is that he hasn't turned around that question right away because he's sitting down with the language and kind of you know he's trying to give us the most right answer. But I'm trying to think of like one thing that's unique about our Vermont fair housing protected classes is that there's a newer protected class which basically says that you can't discriminate based off of the income of a community being served by a new development. It's kind of a stretch with ADUs to say that I don't know if there's like a direct tie there in terms of fair housing law. The thing that does come up a lot that we hear is of course things like reasonable modifications and accommodations. Those are really important rights afforded to folks that fall into disability specific class. So I know one of our most recent HOA calls was an HOA that wasn't accommodating a person who needed a assigned parking spot to go in and out of their building. The other thing that sometimes come up is folks with Section 8 vouchers or other housing subsidies. That like sometimes we hear folks kind of like disproportionately turning away folks with housing subsidies. But yeah, I think this question, the specific question about the ADU is I'm kind of waiting for the firm word from the folks at the Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah,
I
and
will
it's
follow up
and
and
it's
get that response.
it's not just ADU. It can be that no house built in the development is smaller than 2,000 square feet. It can be, you know, lots of these things that really limit the kind of house and the kind of household that can live in or that can build in a neighborhood. That seems really counter to all of the work that we're all trying to do.
Yeah, and again, like just because I come from the fair housing space, like I start to wonder, like, well, who's disproportionately impacted by that? And for instance, like families are disproportionately impacted by that. But I like, and that's tough because it sounds like HOAs are being like used kind of as one would use zoning laws, but just kind of like skirting the municipal law. So yeah, I will follow up with like a stronger answer to that. Or perhaps we can get Taylor to speak directly to the housing. Maybe it's a both and. I'll have a stronger answer and we can encourage Taylor to like speak on this at the next Jericho Housing Committee meeting.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that we're not the only ones thinking about this, and you know, the Planning Commission has just done an amazing job on a new town plan, and so many of the things in the town plan can be skirted around by HOA covenants. And so, you know, I think they're thinking about it from zoning, and is there something that they can be doing in zoning to put some limits on what an HOA can and can't do. And I think from our committee standpoint, what we have seen sometimes is that folks come in with developments and they're just getting boilerplate covenant language and not realizing, you know, not thinking too much about it and not realizing the restrictions and the impact of some of those restrictions. And so from our committee, since we're not the Planning Commission and we're not doing zoning, from our committee, we're trying to think about, okay, well, how can we educate some of these private developers, some of these smaller developers, and some of the bigger ones to say, you know, these are the kinds of things in your covenant that are restrictive and exclusionary, and here's examples of what you what you could include instead, or, what you should be thinking about. Which
Yeah,
then I think goes to the next question I asked you too, which was what role is there for housing committee to play to advocate for housing and interact with the DRB, if any?
Well, like from my understanding, there's a big role there. And I think it would be interesting to look to other housing committees to see what their relationships are. For instance, I know that South Burlington has a very direct relationship between the housing committee and the development review board, to the extent that like there. I'm not aware of any instances where the DRB is beholden to the housing committee, but I do know for certain it's not uncommon for housing committees to kind of put advisements or recommendations forward. And I want to say at the development review board, there's often a staff, or at the South Burlington Housing Committee, there's often a staff person from the DRB that attends those housing committees. But it is kind of another odd spot, because housing committees aren't always developed in the same format. So there are housing committees that were very specifically developed by the municipality with the intent to do certain things. For instance, the Williston Housing Committee was developed by the Williston municipality to govern the Williston Trust Fund. And because each housing committee is kind of formed differently, there are housing committees that were just task force originally, that kind of quickly mobilized and then became more formal as they took on more critical roles and in the work that the town or community was doing. Yeah, I think that that's actually a really good question to even bring to one of our housing committee drop-ins, just kind of more broadly, how do you relate to your development review board? The other thing I think would be really helpful is next week, so not this week, we have the housing drop-in this week. Next week we have our next housing committee workshop, and it's we've invited the senior planner from Williston to teach a workshop called Community Engagement for Municipal Decision Making. And Emily's an expert in the field and really good at talking about the ways that municipalities can relate to community members and involve them in the decision making that's happening, and help them understand why certain decisions are happening, or maybe why it's not uncommon, for instance, for community pushback to come at they're it's responding to a new development, and they're not but the thing that they're concerned about actually isn't maybe related to that development. And I just she had such great tools and visual tools to kind of help understand, or at least for me to understand, ways to communicate that to the public. And I think that that's another great place to lift this question. Well, what is the housing committee role? And I actually sent this question along to Emily so that we can make sure that it's specifically addressed at next week's workshop.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Dave, you can hop in too if you want. Dave is an honorary housing committee member. He's a member of the public, but he's essentially a committee member. Non-voting committee member. That's right.
I did sign up for your Thursday noontime thing. So
Oh, great. That's amazing. I'd love to see you there.
And when is the workshop, Corinne?
It's also on a Thursday and it's also at noon. So December was a beast of a planning month, and it was, because as you said, I am trying to alternate them so that some are in the evenings and some are in the noontime, but it just was the only way I could make it work this time.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's recorded is fantastic. What, Wayne?
Could you give the date and time again? Of the
So-
upcoming workshop?
Yeah, and actually, like, this is nice and easy. So we have a housing committee session this coming Thursday at noon, and then we have a housing committee workshop a week from this Thursday at noon.
Okay,
So that's the 14th and the 21st, Wayne.
okay.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
Is
you
that the
know,
same night?
it's a different link, but let's see. I might be able to even just put the calendar directly in the chat.
That'd be good.
I can't because of my computer's loading, but the link in the chat currently, if you click that and click calendar, that will bring you to the two workshops.
So the first one is housing committees,
Yeah, the
Sure.
first one is the housing committee drop-in.
housing committee drop-in.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is
And the second one is the workshop.
housing committee workshop.
What did you call it?
Yeah, it's a housing committee workshop, and the title is it's community engagement for municipal decision making. I just really like long titles, I guess. I want to be
Community
specific.
engagement for municipal decision making. And I think I've got links to all of these things too that I will certainly send out at the end of the meeting tonight. Before we let you go, last chance, anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions? I know that Corinne has a feedback form. Yeah, Wendy. Corinne has a feedback form where you can suggest different workshop topics or things that you're interested in that you need. And yes,
Yeah,
Wendy, I'll be sure to get that to you. I see your chat.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Wendy. I should, like, in a perfect world, I would be able to just put it right there for you, but my computer is just hating me right now. The other thing, SJ, is that if anyone wanted, and you could share with me the emails of the other housing committee members, including perhaps honorary housing committee members, if you'd like, and I'll add them all to our listserv. The thing I'll note is that our listserv is on MailChimp, and so I've been just telling people that if you don't see the emails, go into your spam. It's almost definitely there. You just have to add us as a contact, and then it'll come right into your inbox.
Awesome. Thank you again. Thank you so much for for making this happen, even though you're all over the place and you're between meetings and you're doing all the things and you're just one person. Really, I really appreciate the work that you've been doing, and I really appreciate you coming tonight and talking to us.
Oh, I mean, I couldn't miss this. I'm so happy you asked me. I'm serious, and I just want to say too, like it's a growing project, and I'm learning too. And so, anytime there's a question where I don't have that answer right away, or if I'm not certain it's the right answer, I'm gonna make sure that I get it to you if it's my last thing I do. But really, I especially these questions where it's so clear that other housing committees are needing that directive or might not even know to look out for that. So that pattern of HOAs as bylaws as maybe being a way to kind of subvert our like very well intended and very hard won law is a big concern, and I'd be interested to see if other if that's coming up in other parts of the state. Oh, and this is the last thing I'll say. I'll give you
No, it's
back your
fine.
agenda. If you're able to provide an example of any of those bylaws, that would be really great for us to see, because I am, in addition to the question around like, is it legal with our current law, the kind of restriction proceeding, I have some very serious fair housing concerns, especially when it comes to the boilerplate language. I'd be curious to see if there's some issues there.
Awesome. Yeah, I can do that. Frederica, did you pull the most recent one that with the 2,000 square foot? Did you download that?
No, but I kind of I know which DRB meeting it was mentioned at, so I can go back and try to pull that.
Okay. Yeah, will do. Well, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me. I had planned to stay on the meeting, but I think it should, I think it should get to where I need to go.
I mean, if you really want to know what happens, all of our meetings are recorded and on the MMC TV website and their archives. So you can watch
That's
housing
amazing.
committee meetings to your heart's content if you want.
Oh, great. That's going to be excellent background music for my work day.
Love it. Take care.
Thank you, SJ, for inviting me, and thank you all for your hard work. It's really important work, and I know you know, and I'm just so grateful that we have advocates on the ground like you. All right, take care.
Thank you.
All right.
I think the square footage was 3,000.
Was it 3?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
That's the one up near the market there, above Mills River Park.
Great. All right. It is 8 o'clock. So I would say let's, Wayne, I know you prepared kind of on this topic, guidelines for.
I put a draft together with some thoughts, and I put down some general guidelines, and I took some of the ones that you put down, put them in red, because I think we might want to discuss those. So put it up there.
I will, absolutely. What was it called? DRB.
By the way, I'm finally retired now. I'm a free man.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. How does it feel? Since when?
I think a week ago last Friday.
How does it feel?
Great. I'm playing my guitar more.
Yes.
I'm gonna go to start going to the conservation committee meetings again. I
Good
did
for
get some
you.
information from Sabina too, from what they're.
Cool.
It's like with our wastewater thing, it's their mapping will be done hopefully the end of December this month. So it's still
Nice.
one of those long-term things. It's some time.
So we're taking a short break. I was just going on doing what Frederica may have been doing, which is looking on DRB for that particular piece. And I just noted that the DRB has a review scheduled for tomorrow
Yep.
on 366 Vermont Route 15, the Riverside property.
Hmm.
So that is apparently moving forward.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that.
I was
At the
going to
end.
bring, yeah, that was the extent of my liaison update. So thank you. That's all I had.
Sorry to steal your thunder.
But I did find
Yeah.
I did find the HOA. I'm just I'm just looking through it right now to find the square foot
Okay, take it away, Wayne.
Okay, so, it needs some more work, but I tried to get some ideas that I think would be central down, so, guidelines for crafting your HOA, and, first of all says and we can craft this into a paragraph or something. Do some wordsmithing, but it's dedicated to safe quality housing in Jericho, addresses a range of price points to support lower and missing middle income ranges. The HOA must conform to relevant Vermont and federal fair housing laws. In addition, it should conform to the goals, priorities specified in our town plan and declaration of inclusion. And JHC recognized the importance of a well-written HOA, so we're supportive here. Protect the investment of members of the new communities. So below are some considerations in drafting your HOA. So I took some broader ones to add. So it must be made available in entirety to prospective home buyers, so they know what they're getting into. The rules must be reasonable, consistent, and enforceable. Now here's referring to some of these various things, and I think Eric can. So we had talked about this the last time, so 2 months ago, because I was sick the last one. Conforms to the zoning regulations applicable, right? So we have zoning, so those regulations you have to, so for example, you can't say it has to be 3,000 square feet on a quarter acre lot or something like that, right?
I was thinking more, you can't say that the minimum lot size is 5 acres when you're in a quarter acre zone.
Okay. That's it, okay.
Now, you may sell a 5 acre lot,
Yeah,
but you can't prohibit it from being subdivided into something smaller.
okay. So are those things, those are things that would be in our zoning regulations, and I'm wondering, do we want to repeat
The
that?
zoning regulation would not say you must have a smaller lot size than the zone allows. The zoning regulations say you cannot exceed the size that zone is allowed for. The largest lot or the smallest,
The smallest, yeah.
So if it's 1 acre, you can't stipulate a 2 acre lot.
you can.
Okay.
If it's zoned 1 acre.
Yeah.
You can't put a 2 acre lot on there.
Okay,
You can,
Okay.
you can't
can.
put a half acre lot on there.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Yes. No, it's
You can put a
confusing.
Bigger lot where it's zoned smaller, but you can't go smaller.
You
than
can't
zone
go
size.
smaller than the zone size, yeah.
can't go smaller than this one.
And I think that,
But that's for the zoning.
But we're trying to, we're trying to say that kind of we're trying to extend that to the HOA
We're
rules.
trying to say that in the HOA, you can't prohibit a subdivision of an existing lot that is within the lot size allowed in that zone. So if you've got a 5 acre lot in a quarter acre of zoning area, you can subdivide that into 20 lots if you wanted to. The HOA can't prevent you from doing that.
Is what we want.
That's my suggestion. We'd have to all approve that and so on and so forth, but that's what I feel is the right way to do it.
Mhm.
Now, this is something we would put in this somehow, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I know down below it said something about subdivision, but it
Yeah.
was not all that clear that you can't subdivide a lot. But I think we need the extra words that say
You can subdivide
can
up to
up to,
the maximum size of or the minimum size of the district.
of the district.
So
Okay,
you're in 1 acre district, you want to subdivide it into 2 lots, and that's allowed by zoning. The HOA can't prohibit you from doing that.
Meets minimum
Or zoning limits.
zoning limits. Yeah. Okay, so that would be. There is a nice, subdivision is allowed but within the zoning limits, okay.
so the problem is
We should
that
cover last time.
HOAs exist that say subdivisions are not allowed. And we would like
Future.
future HOAs
Mhm.
to not include that uh
Yeah, restriction.
restriction is the word. Exactly. So these are a list of restrictions that we don't want to see included in an HOA covenant. We don't want to see a minimum square footage. We don't want to see a minimum cost of principal structure. We don't want to see subdivisions not allowed. These are things that
So,
we would recommend strongly not be included in an HOA covenant.
okay, so these are a table of recommendations
For future HOA
for future.
regulations, that they include these pieces in there.
Or remove
Hmm.
other pieces.
I question. Prohibition of construction equipment except in enclosed garage.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Hmm?
I was wondering about that for insurance concepts and stuff like that.
Well, just for,
Liability.
yeah, thinking about it from the homeowner perspective,
Mhm.
you've bought a house. You're in half-acre zoning. And it's a quiet neighborhood, not a lot of trucks, I mean, your basic Jericho neighborhood.
Mhm.
And you get a next door neighbor who comes in. And he starts loading it up with backhoes and
Bulldozers.
bulldozers and dump trucks and.
I live right by Charlie and his excavator. And thank God for Charlie and his excavator when we needed to be dug out. I mean, yeah, I don't want to live next to a hoarder either, but like my other neighbor works for not propane, one of the heating companies, and so he's got
Hmm.
one of their service vehicles.
Is he
Um,
driving a propane truck or is he driving the service like Stevens is?
you know, like a van truck that you can open up and it's got all the
Yeah.
stuff you would need and
Yeah,
it's got the signage on
that's-
it. But under our covenant, he's technically not allowed to have that in his driveway. And he certainly doesn't bother me at all. But like, this kind of language says who can live in that neighborhood. And that's the kind of thing that
It doesn't say who
It
can live
doesn't.
there.
it
says-
does.
I mean, it's the same thing as saying you can't have a shooting range next door. It's.
A
saying
shooting
these are
range
things
is-
That we would prefer be located in a more commercial type district.
We would prefer be located in a commercial type district is different than you are not allowed to park your company truck in your driveway.
Well, but let's differentiate between a company truck that's a service van.
Okay,
like-
Charlie can't park his excavator in his driveway.
His
And,
excavator and his dump truck and the trailer that go in there.
okay, well, I mean, where's the line and what is the, like, these are
That's a question.
exactly, but this is where there's like a slippery slope here. And we're not writing the covenant language. We're pointing out the things that are included in language, in covenants that are exclusionary. Does that bullet need to be in an HOA? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But by putting it there, it means that my neighbor Charlie and my neighbor Chris can't live in my neighborhood. And that is a certain worker, that's a certain household that isn't allowed in my neighborhood.
But there is a safety consideration. I mean, there was a guy that had this septic truck that was about 60 feet long, just down the road from us. He used to
Sure,
come flying down our road and turn around in our cul-de-sac.
there's a
We had to-
gazillion reasons
we had to
why I
tell him,
don't want that
no.
person and that person and that
Yeah.
person to live in my
But-
neighborhood, and there's a gazillion things that happen that are safety considerations.
Mhm.
What we're talking about is recommendations for developments that are coming into the DRB or that are getting their permits and have boilerplate language of HOAs in front of them. And we're saying, these are things that we really think you should reconsider. And here's why. Maybe that bullet isn't on there, but the idea isn't that we're sitting here coming up with legal language to protect each neighborhood in Jericho. The idea is we're trying to make sure that the new neighborhoods that are built don't inadvertently or without deliberately doing so, don't adopt bylaws that are inherently exclusionary of lower and middle class populations and households.
Right, but I don't know, I mean, I used to drive a dump truck, I know nobody drives a dump truck home from work. Because the company wouldn't allow you,
Mhm.
insurance.
Again, come visit Charlie.
Huh?
Come visit Charlie.
So you have one of those big, huge, 8-wheel dump trucks?
He does. He's got two parcels. And one parcel is for the trucks, although sometimes the excavator and the dump truck hang out in his driveway.
No, I think if the people want to, you also have to provide people that have the, freedom to, if they want to make a safe neighborhood. Trucks, I mean, okay, you have a neighbor, but I mean, if we're talking about little tiny houses on quarter acres stacked in, I mean, is that a place for, construction equipment and big trucks? So.
And
I think it's the
again, like,
context.
these are not questions that each individual scenario is not something that we have to answer.
Yeah.
That is, this blanket list of recommendations and things to consider can be considered for each individual situation by the developer or the parcel owner.
What becomes the issue with that is when we say a lot of these things as a recommendation, it becomes a restriction on the developer. So the developer looks at this and says, if I don't allow construction equipment to be parked on your backyard or your side yard, I'm not going to get my permit. And the developer looks at this and says, somebody who wants to buy a house in my neighborhood, who's expecting a certain amount of value and retained value in their home,
Yeah.
is going to see that and say, oh my God, my neighbor's going to have a semi-trailer back
I mean,
there.
I would never look at an HOA and make sure that there is a bullet that says no construction equipment.
But if you moved into the HOA and you've got a typical house in Jericho is worth what, $400,000 now?
Mhm.
So for most people, that's a big chunk of their retirement money. And your neighbor decides to haul their garbage truck and park it next door to you all the time. The value of your house just went down.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair to do to someone who is struggling to be in that house in the first
And
place?
again, that is not what we're doing. But what I
understand that.
hear you saying, and I think is an important thing, is first of all, our recommendations have no teeth because we are not an enforcing body and the DRB this isn't something that we're sending to the DRB. This is something that we're giving to developers. But what I'm hearing you say is at no point do we want to stand in the way of development either. And so we want to be advocating for inclusive, mixed income, mixed housing or housing variety. We want to be advocating for those things without inhibiting development or scaring developers away. And so how do we strike that balance? I think that's a good point.
We need more developers here. We need more variety of housing here.
Yeah.
And there may very well be a neighborhood where this is the appropriate thing to have. You got a 5-acre lot and you want to park your entire construction crew stuff out back, have at it.
Right. And again, I don't care about the individual. This is a blanket document that's going to anyone in any zone who is doing a PUD or a development of a certain size where they're going to have an HOA. So thinking about it in terms of how we can best be advocating for what we're trying to advocate for. And I think that what Frederica had done and what Corinne was kind of alluding to too, which is taking maybe the last 3 bylaws that have come in front of the DRB and going through them and reading them and finding examples of these things, which I think is where most of I can't believe we made up the construction equipment stuff. And again, we don't have to,
That's a law at Disney properties down in Florida.
you want to talk about problems with Florida? Again, like I'm pushing this only because we're getting hung up on details and I'm worried that we're missing the big picture of the intent of the document.
So I don't disagree with you. We should be focusing on the bigger picture of the document. So, and I am in favor of less rather than more restrictions. I'm also in favor of making sure that the developer looks at the requirements or the suggested HOA regulations that we have in town and says, I can work with this and make my development go through. And doesn't look at some part of it and say, if I follow this recommendation, I'm not going to be able to sell my properties. Because the discussion I had with the guy from Sterling about the 3,000 acre or 3,000 square foot housing was, I'm building a neighborhood that's targeting a certain type of buyer. It's exclusionary in that type.
Right.
But he's also saying the buyers in Jericho, people who are buying in Jericho, want that kind of house.
People who are buying at that price point want that kind of house. And that's not the kind of development that we're advocating for in this town plan. We are talking about mixed income neighborhoods with variety of housing types, not the $1 million house, a neighborhood just of $1 million houses, which I appreciate.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my.
Totally got, yes.
Can I talk now?
Time to go.
Well, I'm sorry, I just like trying to get the.
But
So just a quick note, yeah, I mean,
ahead.
just to return to our basic intent here. Our basic intent is to kind of, put our foot in the door for these decisions, before these decisions get made about, restricting a new development to a certain kind of buyer who would want a certain kind of thing. Because that is by definition, what you just said, it's by definition exclusionary. And, I think that was the whole starting point of this, to kind of say that is not in keeping with what we would suggest if you want to actually stick to our housing targets and create mixed housing.
Mm-hmm.
I just have one thing that, I made a point down, but I'm looking commercial use, not principal use, for nuisance behavior. I used to throw people out of both neighborhoods I lived in that didn't belong there. And, if you have noisy people or people sneaking around that don't belong there. So, I mean, if you, for example, there was some kids that had a party in the street next over, and of course the parents weren't around. All of a sudden, all these cars are in our thing. Hey, police, yeah, I think something's going on. There's about 20 cars in mine that just showed up in the last 20 minutes. Cops came, found where it was, and he's cursing coming through the woods. Oh my God. So, I mean.
But you didn't need a covenant, you didn't need an HOA covenant to make that phone
No,
call.
but I think the thing is, unless I'm reading this wrong, nuisance behavior limitation, are we saying that you don't want it to say that there's nuisance behavior limitations?
So I think that this particular one was about, I can't remember because I came from a bylaw that had to do with the traffic had to be limited to between the hours of 8 to 6 and this, that, or the other thing. And again, the sure, nuisance behavior isn't throwing parties, you call the cops, whatever. The way that it was worded in the document made it sound like only a certain kind of worker, a certain kind of person could live in that neighborhood.
That might also be, you can't turn your garage into a party venue on the weekends because that's going to annoy your neighbors. Or you can't be like that guy down in, the southern part of the state with the shooting range.
Mm-hmm.
In his,
Yeah.
in his yard or something?
Huh?
He put one in his yard or in his house?
Oh, he had a whole shooting instruction there. He violated the zoning regs.
Oh, wow.
He put up berms. He had
It was a whole, yeah.
he had a training program there on how to.
So I
combat
think-
arms.
So I think that what gets sticky is there's some common sense things that you want to see in place for a safe and live a respectful neighborhood. And that language has gotten specific either intentionally so or unintentionally so in such a way that it limits the kind of people who can live in a neighborhood. And there's a history of that being intentional, and some of it the language has just kind of carried along. And so in reading through these bylaws, I think it's worth thinking like, what behavior / who does this language specifically prohibit from living in this neighborhood? And if it's a specific kind of person or a behavior linked to a job or to a demographic, then that's a problem. If it's a behavior that is a safety concern, that doesn't seem like a problem. That doesn't seem exclusionary. So,
Well, I guess I look at the one like nuisance behavior limitations. Yeah. My experience, people of all types, of all backgrounds, can be nuisance behavior because they've got.
Absolutely.
Your kids turn 16 and they start throwing the parties every weekend. It's kind of annoying for your neighbors around that. And that doesn't matter where you came from or your background or what your
Right.
job is.
and so this
about the
particular
people.
bylaw doesn't say you can't have parties, you can't have graduation parties after 9 o'clock. The
It says you can't have
behavior.
every weekend.
The behavior that they point out is a certain kind of traffic or the kind of truck that's in the parking lot or in the driveway or the whatever. So I think these were brainstorms. And I think that what we need are more specific examples of the kinds of language that we're seeing that's problematic.
I guess another question
Yes.
too is, so commercial use, so if you're in a mixed use development, then commercial use, you're
Right.
gonna have it.
But
But-
if you're in a neighborhood like Starboard or
Yeah.
or
And-
Jericho East,
Can I open a bar in my garage?
that would say no,
Yeah,
because you would have lots of traffic off
Yep.
hours.
yeah,
You might
that
have,
would be a nuisance.
Well, but that again is covered by zoning regs. Like our zoning says that you can't have a bar in your garage. So why does the HOA need to say it?
your zoning may allow you to have a home office of some type. And if your home office.
But if you're serving,
Forget the alcohol.
okay,
I'm just using.
like if you're serving food or beverage, that is a specific table of uses
Well,
line.
you can have a
Bylaws,
restaurant or a cooking school in your house. Where you have 20 people coming in every night for a cooking lesson. And they're all parking in the street, and that's great, they're cooking, they're quiet in the house and everything's fine. But there's 20 cars in the street. Where do you park your own car if you don't have off-street parking? That becomes a nuisance to everybody else. So I understand. What we're trying to get at here, which is to reduce restrictions.
Hmm.
But I also understand that there is a need to have some degree of restrictions. To maintain civil living, and that not everybody. Has the same view of what civil living means.
I
I don't know how you-
fundamentally
I don't know
disagree
how
with
you-
that. I don't think that you need to live in an HOA in order to have civil living, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that we can balance this.
Maybe we can try to find what these original HOA things were to see that, I know they can be wordy and, you're trying to save words and We can try to see specifically what they were trying to say. It might not be that objectionable.
I know that in my district, in my homeowners association, you're not allowed to have chickens.
Yeah.
And if you want to change the color of your exterior house, you have to go through a design review board of the town, of the
Mhm.
HOA, and any additions to the house have to be approved by that. And there's a few others. You can't have any kind of in-home service business. People come to you and you do whatever. I
Mhm.
think bookkeeping and accounting kind of stuff is
Yeah.
allowed, but if you want to have a dentist office in your backyard,
Yeah.
no.
Oh
We're
You don't
not
believe in
supposed to-
shade tree dentistry?
my God.
We're not supposed to have piles of trash, but our neighbor had piles of trash, and I said, you're gonna get rats, because rats are everywhere, believe it or not. Your backyard, mine, and they pass through. And if they find shelter, then he goes, oh, I'm gonna make a compost in that poster, and I said, oh, you're gonna build it, and so the skunks are, no, I'm just gonna throw it on the ground. So here's this pile of scrap wood, a pile of compost from the kitchen. And I told his wife, I said, you're gonna have rats, and I swear, within a week, the rats obliged me and. And then he moved out, another guy decided he was going to make a chicken coop, but he didn't do very good at keeping the food away. Well, he got rats too, and one morning I look at it, this rat's as big as a football, he's under my bird feeder, and you could see where he's hippity hopping. So.
New York City rats.
I told him, I said, you
Jericho.
gotta keep the chicken food in your garage and loft, because leave it out there in the shed, they'll find it, so.
Okay, so it's 8:30, so I want to go to, before we close, anything else on that?
So we're gonna review, the conclusion was review some HOAs and see if we can find more specific what that language was.
Yeah,
And I agree, we need to find the language that is exclusionary based on type of person, but it's okay
Yeah.
for exclusionary based on the activity.
Yeah.
No one wants a gun range in their backyard, in their neighbor's backyard. I think.
and
I
yeah,
agree. I think that SJ, I think your instinct is to basically to go with, there shouldn't really be such a thing as an HOA, and I understand that too. But I come from a background where I grew up in an apartment block, so very dense living, and we had not really HOAs, but something like it, and it just was something to it's a civil contract kind of thing where
Yeah.
you stick to rules that, for example, when I grew up, I wasn't allowed to play the recorder between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. because neighbors would like to take naps, and there were these rules that were made just to make living together possible. And I think those are okay. I think that's up to whoever lives there. But I think what we want to avoid is rules that might be exclusionary. And I think your example of not being able to drive to work between, except for the hours between 8 and 6, is certainly one that could be exclusionary. So we just have to be careful in what is exclusionary and what is not.
yeah, and it is about the people, because housing is about people. But it is also about, we are the housing committee, right? So we do want to be really mindful of not just the people and the income bracket, but also making sure that the possibility for naturally occurring affordable housing, more modest housing for ADUs, for all of the diversity that we've been pushing for, that those possibilities aren't limited. Wendy, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, I had to find my unmute. And
No problem.
I wasn't planning on talking tonight. But just this, hold on one second, let me get my video. This conversation around HOAs, which I've been really super interested in. For folks who don't know me, I'm on the planning commission too, and the DEI commission with SJ. And it's something that's been bugging me, and that I've been really interested in learning more. this conversation has just sparked some thinking for me. And some of you might know that there's a grant program that is a new grant program by UVM, the Leahy Center for Community Engagement, and they are offering small capacity building grants. And what the purpose of those capacity building grants are to help local municipalities and other smaller entities who are tackling a variety of different kinds of rural problems. But it's in the case that I'm thinking about, sorry, I'm not being too articulate, but I really think there's an opportunity to use this, how our HOAs either helping or hurting local communities achieve their affordable housing goals is a really compelling question, and I think can make for a really good grant application. And right now, it's just a letter of intent, and I've been told by the program manager that just get it in. It's like, 3 or 4 questions, just get it in. But the whole purpose is to help municipalities increase their capacity. So rather than, your committee is raising great questions, but you're all volunteers. We all are volunteers, and we could use some help from folks that do this for a living, like having a consultant review the HOAs, having a consultant like Abundant Sun or some of the other consultant agencies that Jericho already has a relationship with, and really folks who are really steeped in equity and inclusion, reading through some of these things and supporting the work that you're doing. I guess that's it. Sorry.
No, that's
Sorry.
interesting.
I think that's
The bargain.
Wendy, so you are making this proposal for a grant? This is what you're
No,
doing?
she's suggesting we do that.
Okay.
Well, or to help,
Or
I
have
could
Linda
certainly
do it.
help craft it. I've been kind of searching around for some ideas with the planning commission. They have, we've talked about creating guides for homeowners about pros of making how to make your how to create an accessible dwelling unit for your house. What you need to do, what are the payoffs, kind of like a toolkit for homeowners. That was an idea that we were pitching, and there were some other things related to affordable housing. But I feel like this one is really more compelling, particularly because one of the grant criteria is ability to impact on other communities in the state. And it feels like we're not the only one, just especially based on what the speaker was saying earlier, we're not the only communities that are grappling with this issue. And I would have just held my thought rather than interjecting in your meeting, but the letter of intent is due on the 18th, and it's pretty simple. I would be happy to work with someone on it. I just don't want to have a suggest an idea and say, here, you do it. So I'm happy to help craft it, but I didn't want to just go out and do it without talking to y'all first, because you're doing great work and have put in a lot of already research. And I don't mean to suggest it saying that the work that you're doing is not great, because it is, but the whole point of this grant program is to build capacity for municipalities.
What do you think the work looks like? So surveying, the HOA covenants, bylaws that are coming through. And then looking at it from an equity and an affordable housing lens.
Yep.
What else? I mean, I think one of the things that I've been searching for that I haven't been able to find is creating a boilerplate template that is friendly, that is housing friendly.
Yeah, that totally good. And another big piece of this grant, and excuse me to interject, but this is an important one I should have said up front, was that the intention of the program is to build relationships between municipalities and UVM, including how municipalities can work better with students. So a part of this could be, with the help of the Leahy Center, is getting undergrad or graduate students to do some of this research.
Mhm.
And they could be doing, research, nationwide about what's going on with HOAs and equity and affordable housing issues.
This is awesome stuff. This is really, inspiring to hear this idea, because this would really take this up to the next level. I'm concerned about the deadline. You're saying December
It's
18th?
really easy.
Wow.
It's a really low bar. It's purposefully a low bar because it's a letter of intent and then you get invited back. But when I talked to the grant administrator last week, she was just like, just get it in. People will talk to you about it. Don't err on the side of overthinking it.
Okay. And I mean, there is the big thing that we keep pushing up against that does require, I mean, all of these things require a level of expertise, but the legal aspect of this is really confusing. And then, but also to hear Corinne say that even the CCRPC and some of the folks around the state aren't sure how these things interact with last year's housing legislation and the Housing Act is
Well, Wendy, I thank you for bringing this up. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us on the AHC to look at. And one particular part of it for us is that we could use this to develop a model HOA agreement for the town of Jericho. This is what Jericho considers to be appropriate HOA language for people building in our town, and anyone else can copy it and take whatever they want. But this is an expression of our desires in the town of Jericho for what should or should not be in an HOA. And if we can get someone to give us, here are the best practices in HOAs across the country, and use that to craft it, run it through some legal people afterwards to make it fully proper. Why not? Why not step to the head of the class?
yeah.
I would be happy, Wendy, to work with you to get that letter out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Send me the links to the pages and we'll start writing something.
All right. And so, Eric, you have some time in the next day or two?
I'll make it.
Okay, cool. I'll follow up with you and also let Linda know because ultimately the town has to be the applicant.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
If we have to do a little more of the legwork to make it happen for her, I'm up for it.
Frederica, what does Google say?
Might be.
I just searched for HOA exclusionary for those terms, and a lot of things
my
came up
gosh.
that would be interesting to read on the background of how HOAs have been exclusionary in the past. Beyond a letter of intent, if this escalates to actual grant writing, then that's the kind of background that you need to be able to read in your ample free time. But so there's a whole, like, what I'm seeing is that, there nationally there's people that have thought about this and written about this from a legal perspective and from other points of view. Of course, we're not the first ones to think of this.
They've been around for really a very long time, but I think HOAs have been underappreciated for their role in shaping the character of neighborhoods.
All right, is it?
I'm
Go
gonna
ahead,
sign
Wendy.
off. I'm just gonna sign off and just say, Eric, I will send you the links and follow up with you tomorrow.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Wendy. Really
Thank you for
appreciate
your
it.
work. Yep, bye.
All right. I'd like to skip down to skip DRB discussion. I think that's kind of wrapped into what we've been talking about. And move back to liaison updates. DRB, Frederica, you were just pointing out the Riverside project.
So I just that there's a meeting tomorrow. Yes. And, Eric already mentioned that that it's about the Riverside project, about a major subdivision that's planned for that. And then there was another meeting on November 8th that I haven't quite caught up on yet, but that was a minor thing. So I can report on that next time.
And so to give a little context, the Wisdom House folks, Bill Butler and Michael Oman, who were here a few months ago talking about Wisdom House, they are their plans have morphed a little bit, and I may invite them back in the next couple of months to talk about where they're at. But they're really hoping to move forward and to potentially take over a larger chunk of that land. And this, my understanding is that this project that's going in front of the DRB is just for that warehouse building. Yeah.
So this is the guy Tetro that owned the land, they're assuming the development from him, or they bought him out, or?
I mean, I think that they are in discussion.
Oh, okay.
And that's just the old building that they're,
So what is happening tomorrow night is Tetro at just that old building.
the old mill.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they said that was a 15-acre lot that's going with it though. The DRB application. But
Really?
that's-
Okay.
That's what I read.
Well, maybe it's changed since I talked to
And they're reviewing that tomorrow.
I talked to the
night, too?
boys because I didn't look at the applications as a
Yeah,
conversation.
They're calling it a major subdivision, which means it's more than 3 lots.
Yeah, I think they want to put, I can't remember how many units in the warehouse, in the mill.
So the structure is still viable then, right?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Conservation.
Yes. So I got in touch with, yes. So they were discussing the Davis Farm. So their next meeting is next Wednesday, the 20th. So we're ahead of them. But they were discussing the date of the Davis Farm, and they're looking for a conservation easement, and they need $35,000 to go forward with that to help them develop, the other parts for the parcels. Apparently Libby Strong and the JULT are being involved. And the other thing is the Davises as another avenue, are looking at a land trust, because the problem is that he has yet to find someone who'd be interested in taking over the farm and being a farmer. So, and he's also to help move this along. He will accept less than appraised value to help, whatever organizations can help come up with the money to put it in trust. The other thing is that they've been looking at the mapping, and like with everything else, it's delayed out until around the end of this month.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that isn't done yet.
Yeah.
That's the natural resource mapping?
Yeah. The guys involved with it, but everybody else. I'm
Yep.
sure is busy.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I've lost 3 months. I'm just so behind on everything.
Oh, well, there is somebody who's retired that could be.
Ooh.
prevailed upon.
I got a long to-do list. at
Oh, no,
home.
sorry, I said that.
So select board meeting, they actually did come in front of the select board. I can't remember if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, and asked for that 35,000, and I think they got it.
Yeah, okay.
There is an ongoing organizational assessment happening, which is basically an audit of the planning and zoning office and the town administrator's office. And this is the point is to to look at the work that's being done with a thinking that perhaps expanding staffing is needed. So there's lots of talk in the town plan, and we've talked about a need for expanding the capacity of the municipal government. One piece of that is staffing, and the piece that the select board is currently looking at is staffing. And so they're undertaking this audit right now with the goal of answering that question. Not really housing related, but just as an aside, if you're not aware of the situation with the town garage, that's a huge thing that's going on, and it sounds like a vote for on the bond for a new town garage will be on this March town meeting. So,
If you saw the photos they sent out in the front porch forum today.
oh no, I
They've got
didn't.
a site
didn't
visit
see.
going on this weekend at the town garage to see what's there.
It's
Looks pretty rough.
the report is
Scathing.
embarrassing and horrifying.
And why is that? Is it the town that's responsible for some maintenance that's not getting done,
When you have a toilet that you can't close the door to be in,
or?
when there's no one knows exactly where the septic is.
Oh.
There's no
okay.
heating.
You can't fit the trucks in because the trucks are too long to fit within the space.
I mean, it's just mind blowing. And then we already talked about the second public hearing on the town plan. So that's that,
And the date and time?
December 19th at 6:30. I imagine it's gonna be adopted at that meeting, right? The timeline,
Fingers crossed.
right? Because if they ask for any substantive changes, then,
We have to go through 2 more public hearings.
and then
And
our
the
town plan
meeting.
expires, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think from what I understood that's just, the public meeting is just to kind of present the final draft, and then it's gonna be like a vote on it, and that's it. I mean, it's not really like, okay, now we're gonna revise it again.
Yeah,
In theory.
and
If
yeah,
the public presents significant opposition to it, the select board could say, oh, we have to make these changes because of X. And then we go through another two-week warning periods. So we would not have it ready in time for the town meeting.
that's, I mean, I don't really have any reservations about it, but there's always an amendment process too, if we needed to. Okay, any other liaison updates before I move on to town business or other business? And agenda?
I have been looking on the DRB application, and the meeting will be for residential as well, commercial and residential. We're looking at 15 residential units on one side, 8 commercial units in another, and another 15.
Yeah,
Wow.
I just
Oh,
looked at
that's
the
much
plat.
bigger than what they were
I
talking
just
about.
looked, the plat looks like very impressive. I just looked at the plat. It looks huge. It looks like there's a lot.
Okay,
And then
that's
the
much,
architectural drawings all look like kind of lower buildings. So I don't know. This looks very different from what they had in
That's-
mind previously.
that's different than what I heard a month ago. Okay, good.
The mouse thing, or?
No, this is
No, this is not.
Tetro
This is
property.
Tetra.
Oh, he's different, he's separate from them, then. Okay.
Well, he sold it off, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, no, sorry, he still does. He bought it
He
from
still
Old-
owns it.
Old Crow or Old Crow Logging or something like that, and that's
Oh.
Old Mill Properties now is the one they own that owns it.
And this is different than the Wisdom House guy.
Correct.
Yeah.
The Wisdom House guys wanna buy a portion of that from him and develop it.
Oh, okay.
Got names and everything on the streets.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
they
met
got
with them,
Whole
like,
architectural plans that look like they might conform with their current character-based zoning, or they're designed to do that.
I will take a peek. Okay, so other business, is really, I'm gonna send you the information for the housing committee drop-in and the workshop. And I'll also ask if you want to be added to the email list, the listserv. Let me know and I'll make sure that your name gets added, because those updates are always full of good information, as well as letting you know what workshops and things are coming up. So in January, we will have oh gosh, what's his name? We'll have someone coming to talk about energy efficiency and housing development. And I will be more specific than that in an email. Sorry. We also will keep talking about the HOA stuff. Maybe have an update on Leahy grant and our letter of intent. We need to start thinking about and planning our annual report on housing, which we said we would do as part of the housing target resolution. So we need to kind of think about what that first one looks like. Plan that out. And then the other thing, I feel like there was one more thing, but I can't think about it, or I can't remember. Does anybody else have anything that we need to discuss in January? Okay. 8:57. Any last words? Any closing thoughts? Dave, you got any last minute, get it under the,
No, not really. So I looked at the document that Frederica posted the link to. It just seems to be at odds with everything we've talked about. I mean, Frederica noted that it had to be a minimum of 22,000 square feet.
yeah,
There's 55 acres there, and they're putting 7 dwellings.
yeah,
No multiple dwelling of 2 or more units.
yep,
No multiple building of 2 or more units. So anyway,
yeah,
So if they're-
That's kind of how this whole thing got on our radar, I think, was through that one.
all right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.